here is section 5.1. It's an introduction to decimals. You're going to learn how to write a decimal in standard form, write it as fractions, compare decimals, and round decimals. So the very first thing we need to talk about is the entire place value system here. So if you look at this little chart in purple, we've up till this part have talked about from the ones digit. We talked about whole numbers. Okay, so we have ones, tens, hundreds, thousands, 10,000s, 100,000s, millions, and then you can keep going: 10 millions, 100 millions, trillion, and so forth. Well, what happens if we have a number that is that has a decimal? So a decimal is a part of a whole. So you don't have so for example, if you have 754.98, you don't quite have 755, but you have 98 hundredths of a unit. So you're short to make it 755. So what is the place value after to the right of the decimal? We have, it's called, the first place is called the 10th spot. Then the hundredths, there's a THS after all of these. Then there's the thousandths, then there's the 10,000ths, 100,000ths, millionths, and then you can keep going: 10 millionths, 100 millionths, billion, billionths, and there's a THS after each place value to the right of the decimal. So let's talk about how you're going to write or read decimals in words. The part before the decimal, you will write or read that part in words. When you reach the decimal, you will put the word and. The word and is where the decimal goes. And then the third part is you're going to write the decimal part in words or say it as if it were a whole number, but it carries the name of the last digit. So if you had, for example, this number right here, this would be 754 and 98 hundredths, because it's the last digit is in the hundredth spot. Remember, the first is the tenths, and the second is hundredths with a THS. Okay? So remember, the decimal is the word and. So you're not, please don't do this. A lot of students do this. They'll say 754. Take the word and out of the whole part. So it's 754 and 98 hundredths. Okay? So let's do some examples. So for example number 1, we're just going to write these decimals in words. So this one would be 7 tenths. And for B, B would be negative 50 and 82 hundredths. And C would be 21 and 93 thousandths. Okay. For example 3, we have a diamond here, and it's 545.67 carats. How do you read that number? It'd be 545 and 67 hundredths, because it's 2 places after the decimal. And for example 3, we are talking about write the decimal, the following sentence in words. It's the oldest known fragment of the Earth's crust in zircon crystals, and the number is 4.276 billion years old. So it's 4 billion and 276 thousandths. Okay. Now we use decimals for when we're writing checks. So here is how you will write, and a lot of you guys don't write checks and haven't really learned properly how to write a check. But here is a check. You put the dollar amount here with the decimal, and you always want to put the first digit as close to that line as possible because people can actually add numbers in front. So, and now what you have to do is spell this out, and you're going to spell it out by 368, 368, and there's a decimal, and what they'll do is put this 42 over 100. It's always, when you're talking about money, it's always over 100 because there's 100 pennies in a dollar. Okay, so here's another example for you. This is asking you to fill in the check for Camelot Music. They want you to put $92.98, so $92.98, and then spell it out. 92 and 98 over 100, and then always put a squiggly line to the end so no one can actually add any words in there and change the value. So the next thing you're going to have to do is write a decimal in standard form. And this is just writing it. The words are going to be written. You have to be able to translate it into a number. So for this one, you're going to read this. 48, look for the word and, because that's where your decimal is going to go. So it's 48, and there's your decimal, 26 hundredths. So you want two places, so 26 goes after the decimal. Now, if it said 26 thousandths, I want to talk about that. What if it said 26 thousandths? Then you would write 48.026 because we want to be in the thousandth spot. Okay, so be careful. Sometimes you have to insert a zero. For number 6, it says 6 and 95 thousandths. Actually, that's an example of what I just went over. So 6 and 95 thousandths, we want 3 places after the decimal. Okay. Next thing you're going to have to do is be able to write a decimal as a fraction. Okay. So what you do in that case, so 40.47, you're going to take that decimal, 47, and you're going to put it over however many digits you have will be how many zeros. So this is the hundredths, tenths, hundredths. So 4 is the tens, 7 is the hundredths, so it's over 100. I always think of it as however many digits is however many zeros with a 1 in front, okay? So for example 8, we've got a mixed number. This is 5 and 9 over 10, okay? And you may also be asked to turn something into a fraction and then put it in simplest form, and we talked about simplest form. So for number 9, 0.125 is 125 over 1,000. See, there's 3 digits, 3 zeros. And then what you want to do is simplify it. And in this case, you can see that 125 goes into both of these. So the simplest form is 1/8. Number 10, this is 43 and 5 tenths. And 5 tenths can be reduced as 1/2. So 43 and a half. And for number 11, negative 105 is the whole part. And 83 over 1,000, because there's 3 digits. You want 3 places, 3 digits. Okay? Now we're going to talk about comparing decimals. There's a few different ways you can compare decimals. You can either convert them both into decimals. So for example, if you were to compare 5 tenths and 8 tenths, you would turn this into 5 tenths is 0.5 and 8 tenths is 0.8. And think of these as money. What's bigger? Think of this as 50 cents and this is 80 cents. What's bigger? 80 cents. So 0.8 is bigger. You know, the other way you could do this problem is you could cross multiply like we did in the last section. So 5 tenths versus 8 tenths, what's bigger? So if you cross multiply, this 5 times 10 is 50 and 8 times 10 is 80. What's bigger? 80 is bigger, so 8 tenths is a bigger fraction. That's another way to do it. Okay, So when you're comparing fractions, or decimals, I should say, you want to compare the digits in the same place from left to right. So when two digits are not equal, you want to look at, first of all, look at the whole number. Sometimes that's a giveaway. So these are both 28, but this is 2, 5, 3, and this is 2, 6, 3. So the 2's are the same. The 6, this is bigger than this 5. So obviously this decimal is larger, okay? So let's look at another example. Example 12. We've got 0.378 and 0.368. So 7, this 7 and this 6, we're going to compare. That's larger, so 0.378 is larger than 0.368. Okay, and for this next example, example 13, we've got the 0.0 and the 0.2. Obviously 0.2 is larger, so this decimal is larger than that. Okay, and we are on example 14 now. Another example. So how would we compare these two? So we've got 0.0, 0.0, and then this is a 0, but that's a 1, so that's bigger, so this decimal will be larger. And the last objective is, how do you round decimals? Okay, so if they ask you to round, you've got to be able to round to whatever, you have to know the place value. So for this example, it says round to the nearest tenth. The 2 is in the 10th spot. So what you do is you look at the digit in the next place over in the 100th spot. If this digit is a 5, 6, 7, 8, or a 9, you're going to bump this up and turn the rest into zeros. If it's not, if it's a 0, 1, 2, 3, or a 4, you're going to leave that digit alone and turn these all into zeros. So for example, 7, 3, 6, that's good. This is the 10th spot. This is a 3. This 3 is not greater than 4. It's not a 5. So we're going to leave this as 0.2, and we're going to turn everything else into zeros. So this rounded to the nearest tenth would be 736.2. Now, if I asked you to round this to the nearest, let's say, thousandths, okay, so 736.2359. This is the thousandths spot. Okay, that's the thousandth spot. So we're going to look at this 9. This 9 says, hey, move this up. So this is going to be a 6. So it's 736.23. That will turn into a 6 and make that 9 a 0. Okay. For number 16, it's asking you to round this decimal to the nearest hundredth. So the hundredth is the 2. That's the hundredth spot. So the 7 says move that up to a 3. So this would be negative 0.03. Okay. Now, we're going to talk about irrational numbers. The circumference of a circle divided by the diameter, is always this irrational number called pi, 3.14159265. Obviously, that number, it's irrational because it never repeats, never ends, it keeps going. But we like to round this, this pi digit to a number. And sometimes they'll ask you to round to the nearest tenth, hundredths, thousandths. So if they ask you, round this to the nearest hundredth, the 4 is the hundredth spot. So the 1 tells you to leave that 4 alone. So it's 3.14. Okay, and that's commonly the number that's used for pi, 3.14. And I believe that culminates the assignment for 5.1. Thank you.